Ethan Cole, a Taekwondo master blinded by tragedy, rebuilt his life with the help of Scout, a retired K-9 hero. But when a ruthless biker gang leader sees Ethan's influence as a threat, tensions explode. Can discipline and unity overcome intimidation and chaos? In the bustling heart of Portland, Oregon, where the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the crisp morning air, Ethan Cole stood perfectly still in his modest apartment. His fingers traced the smooth surface of his championship medals, each one a testament to a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. The early sunlight filtered through the windows, but for Ethan, the world had been shrouded in darkness for the past 18 months. The accident that took his sight occurred during what should have been another routine training session. A miscalculated move, a moment of distraction, and everything changed. The doctors called it a miracle that he survived, but for months afterward, Ethan questioned whether survival alone was enough. The transition from being a celebrated Taekwondo champion to depending on others for the simplest tasks had been excruciating. Running his hand along the wall, Ethan made his way to the kitchen, where the familiar sound of paws clicking against the hardwood floor announced Scout's presence. The German Shepherd, a former military K-9 unit member, had become more than just a guide dog. He was a bridge between Ethan's past and present, a constant reminder that strength could take many forms. "Morning, buddy," Ethan spoke softly, reaching down to scratch behind Scout's ears. The dog's steady breathing and unwavering presence had become an anchor in his new reality. Scout's military background made him uniquely suited to understand discipline and purpose, qualities that had defined Ethan's life before the accident. As he prepared his morning tea, muscle memory guiding his movements, Ethan's mind wandered to the training center he was about to open. It had taken months of planning, countless conversations with contractors, and unwavering support from his former student, Olivia Harper, now a respected police officer in the community. The center would be different from traditional dojangs. It would be a sanctuary for those who needed more than just physical training. The phone rang, its distinctive tone indicating it was Olivia calling. "Ethan, everything's set for the grand opening tomorrow." Her voice carried the same determination he remembered from her training days. "The permits are all in order, and the local news wants to cover the event." "Thanks, Olivia. I couldn't have done this without you," Ethan replied, genuine gratitude in his voice. "How's the neighborhood taking it?" There was a slight pause before Olivia answered. "Most people are excited, but there's been some talk. Travis Miller and his crew have been asking questions about the center." Ethan's grip tightened slightly on his cup. He knew of Travis Miller by reputation, a self-proclaimed leader of a motorcycle crew that had been gaining influence in the area. "Questions or concerns?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Both, maybe. Just be careful, okay?" Travis isn't known for his diplomatic approach to new developments in what he considers his territory. After ending the call, Ethan spent the morning going through his forms, each movement precise despite his blindness. Scout watched attentively, occasionally adjusting Ethan's position with a gentle nudge. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day, transforming both their lives in unexpected ways. Later that afternoon, Ethan and Scout made their way to the center for final preparations. The familiar route had become second nature, with Scout guiding him past the coffee shop where Sarah, the owner, always called out a friendly greeting, and the newsstand where Mr. Chun would describe the day's headlines. The training center itself was modest but purposeful. Ethan had insisted on specific modifications: textured flooring to help with orientation, acoustic panels to enhance sound recognition, and carefully placed equipment that would allow him to teach effectively despite his blindness. Every detail had been considered to create an environment where limitations could be transformed into strengths. As he walked through the space, running his hands along the walls and equipment, Ethan remembered his own master's words: "True strength isn't in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." Those words had taken on new meaning since the accident, and now they would become the foundation of his teaching philosophy. The sound of motorcycles rumbling past the center broke through his thoughts. Scout's posture changed subtly, a tension running through his body that Ethan had learned to recognize. The bikes slowed down, their engines growling like distant thunder before accelerating away. "Looks like we might have some interested observers, Scout," Ethan murmured, patting the dog's head reassuringly. He understood that opening the center wouldn't be without its challenges, but he was prepared for whatever came his way. The accident had taken his sight but had given him something else in return: a deeper understanding of true strength and resilience. As evening approached, Ethan and Scout made their final checks of the center. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him but for everyone who would walk through these doors seeking guidance, strength, or simply a place to belong. Back in his apartment, Ethan sat in his favorite chair, Scout's head resting on his knee. The city's nighttime sounds filtered through the windows, distant traffic, the occasional siren, the whisper of wind through trees. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the heights of competitive success to the depths of despair, and finally to this moment of new purpose. His phone buzzed with messages of support from former students and colleagues, each one a reminder of the community that had refused to let him fade into isolation. Tomorrow, he would begin giving back to that community in his own way, teaching not just the physical aspects of Taekwondo, but the deeper principles that had helped him survive his darkest days. As he prepared for bed, Ethan felt a familiar mix of anticipation and uncertainty. The training center represented more than just a new business venture. It was a statement about the possibility of transformation, about finding strength in vulnerability, and about the power of community to heal and uplift. Scout's gentle breathing beside his bed provided its usual comfort as Ethan drifted off to sleep, his mind already mapping out the lessons he would share with his first students. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for the first time in a long while, Ethan Cole felt truly ready to face whatever lay ahead. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. The morning of the training center's opening dawned bright and clear, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Ethan arrived early, Scout's steady presence guiding him through the morning preparations. The air hummed with anticipation as the first curious visitors began to arrive, their footsteps and voices creating a symphony of excitement that filled the space. Among the first arrivals was Marcus Chun, a 12-year-old whose father owned the local newsstand. The boy had been watching the center's renovation progress for months, pressing his nose against the windows whenever he passed by. "Mr. Cole," he called out, his voice carrying a mixture of nervousness and enthusiasm, "my dad says you were a champion. Will you teach us how to be champions too?" Ethan smiled, turning toward the voice. "Being a champion isn't just about winning medals, Marcus. It's about becoming the best version of yourself." He gestured around the room. "This place isn't just about learning kicks and punches. It's about building something stronger inside ourselves." As more people filtered in, Olivia arrived in her police uniform, having stopped by before her shift. She moved through the crowd, her presence adding an official stamp of approval to the proceedings. The local news crew set up their equipment, preparing to document what they sensed could be a significant story for the community. The opening ceremony was simple but meaningful. Ethan, standing at the center of the training floor with Scout by his side, addressed the gathered crowd. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. "Welcome to more than just a training center," he began. "This is a place where we'll learn that our greatest limitations often hide our greatest strengths." As he spoke, a low rumble of motorcycles approached the building. The sound grew louder until it stopped directly outside. Scout's posture stiffened slightly, but Ethan continued his address, his voice unwavering. Through the open door came Travis Miller, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was younger than most expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with an intensity that seemed to fill any room he entered. Travis moved through the crowd with deliberate slowness, his leather jacket creaking softly as he walked. He stopped near the back, crossing his arms and leaning against the wall. His crew remained outside, their motorcycles idling like restless beasts. Ethan finished his speech and began demonstrating basic forms, his movements flowing with a grace that seemed to defy his blindness. The audience watched in amazed silence as he executed complex techniques with perfect precision, Scout occasionally providing subtle guidance through gentle touches. "Pretty impressive for a blind man," Travis's voice cut through the quiet. It wasn't quite a compliment, but not entirely a challenge either. "But how do you expect to teach kids when you can't even see what they're doing wrong?" The room tensed, but Ethan's response came with unchanged composure. "Would you like to help me demonstrate?" he offered, gesturing to the training mat. "Sometimes the best way to understand is through experience." Travis hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the invitation. After a moment's consideration, he shrugged off his jacket and stepped forward. "Sure, why not? Show us what you've got, champion." What followed was not the confrontation many feared, but rather a masterclass in control and precision. Ethan guided Travis through basic movements, his hands occasionally adjusting stances and positions with expert accuracy. Despite his initial skepticism, Travis found himself following along, his natural athletic ability allowing him to grasp the techniques quickly. Power without control is like a ship without a rudder, Ethan explained, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. True strength lies in understanding when to use our abilities, not just how. The demonstration concluded with Travis executing a near-perfect basic form, earning genuine applause from the crowd. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face, perhaps pride, perhaps uncertainty, before his usual mask of indifference returned. As Travis moved to leave, Ethan called out, "You have natural talent. Our doors are always open if you want to learn more." Travis didn't respond, but his exit was notably quieter than his entrance. The rest of the opening day unfolded smoothly, with parents registering their children for classes and adults inquiring about evening sessions. Olivia stayed longer than she'd planned, helping to organize paperwork and watching Ethan interact with potential students. "You handled that situation with Travis perfectly," she commented during a quiet moment. "But don't let your guard down. He's not used to being challenged, especially not in front of an audience." Ethan nodded, understanding the warning beneath her words. "Sometimes the hardest battles are fought with respect rather than force," he replied. "Travis reminds me of myself at his age, all power and no direction." As the day drew to a close and the last visitors departed, Ethan sat on the training mat with Scout beside him, reflecting on the day's events. The center already felt alive with possibility, filled with the lingering energy of excitement and hope. His phone buzzed with messages of congratulations and inquiries about class schedules. Among them was a text from Mr. Chun. "Marcus hasn't stopped talking about the demonstration. Thank you for giving these kids something to believe in." That night, as Ethan prepared for bed, he could feel the subtle shift in the air, the sense that something significant had begun. The training center was more than just a new business. It was a challenge to the status quo, a declaration that strength could emerge from vulnerability, and that true power lay in lifting others up rather than pushing them down. Scout settled into his usual spot beside Ethan's bed, his steady presence a reminder of the unexpected ways life could bring healing and purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, and perhaps new confrontations with Travis and his crew. But for now, in the quiet of his apartment, Ethan Cole felt the satisfaction of having taken the first step on a new path, one that would not only reshape his own life but potentially transform an entire community. 3 weeks after the training center's opening, the impact of Ethan's presence in the neighborhood had begun to ripple outward in unexpected ways. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows as he led his first class of the day, a group of teenagers who had quickly become devoted students. Among them was Lisa Martinez, a quiet 14-year-old who had initially hung back during classes, her shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. Today, however, she stood tall as she practiced her forms, each movement growing more confident under Ethan's guidance. "Remember to breathe through the movement," Ethan instructed, Scout padding silently beside him as he moved through the class. "The power doesn't come from your muscles alone, it comes from your center, your focus." His acute hearing picked up the subtle adjustments in his students' breathing, the whisper of fabric as they moved, the slight changes in air currents that told him exactly where each person stood. After class, Lisa lingered behind, her feet shuffling nervously on the training mat. "Master Cole," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "can I talk to you about something?" Ethan gestured toward the small seating area he had set up in the corner of the dojang. "Of course, Lisa. What's on your mind?" The girl settled into a chair, Scout automatically positioning himself between them, his presence providing a comforting buffer. "It's about Travis Miller and his crew," she said, her voice growing stronger. "They've been hanging around my family's restaurant, making customers uncomfortable. My parents are worried about losing business, but they're afraid to say anything." Ethan absorbed this information, his fingers absently stroking Scout's fur as he considered the implications. The Martinez family restaurant was a neighborhood institution, known for its authentic Mexican cuisine and warm atmosphere. "How long has this been going on?" "Since last week. They just sit there for hours, ordering almost nothing. Sometimes they rev their motorcycles really loud when families are trying to eat outside." Lisa's voice quavered slightly. "Yesterday, Travis told my dad that maybe he should consider paying for protection, since the neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be." The subtle threat in Travis's words wasn't lost on Ethan. It seemed the young man had shifted his attention from the training center to other targets, perhaps hoping to assert his dominance over the neighborhood in different ways. "Lisa, you did the right thing telling me about this," Ethan said, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes the hardest part of facing a challenge is taking that first step of speaking up." The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and private lessons, but Ethan's mind kept returning to Lisa's revelation. During the afternoon break, he called Olivia to share his concerns. "I can increase patrols in the area," she offered, "but without any direct evidence of wrongdoing, there's not much else we can do officially." "I understand," Ethan replied, thinking of the Martinez family and others who might be experiencing similar pressure. "But maybe there's another way to handle this. Something that doesn't involve direct confrontation." That evening, after the last class had ended, Ethan and Scout made their way to the Martinez restaurant. The aroma of grilled meats and spices filled the air, mingling with the sound of quiet conversation and clinking plates. As they entered, Mr. Martinez hurried over to greet them. "Master Cole, what an unexpected pleasure." The restaurant owner's voice carried a warmth that couldn't quite mask his underlying tension. "Please, let me show you to our best table." Over dinner, Ethan shared his proposal, a community gathering at the restaurant, featuring demonstrations from his students and traditional Mexican dance performances. "We'll invite the local media, make it a real celebration of neighborhood unity," he explained. "Show everyone that this community stands together." Mr. Martinez's initial hesitation gave way to cautious enthusiasm as Ethan outlined the details. By the time the last flan had been served, plans were already taking shape. The next morning, as Ethan prepared for his first class, the familiar rumble of motorcycles approached the training center. This time, however, Travis entered alone, his boots echoing on the hardwood floor. "Heard you were at Martinez's place last night," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Planning some kind of neighborhood party?" Ethan turned to face him, Scout alert but calm at his side. "You should come," he replied. "Your crew too. Show everyone that you're part of this community, not just passing through it." A long silence followed, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the whisper of the air conditioning. Finally, Travis spoke, his tone different from anything Ethan had heard from him before. "You really don't give up, do you?" "Neither do you," Ethan observed. "The question is, what are we fighting for? Power over others, or the strength to lift them up?" Travis shifted his weight, the leather of his jacket creaking softly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple at all," Ethan acknowledged. "But it's worth the effort. The evening beginners class starts at 7 if you're interested. No pressure, no expectations. Just an open door." The younger man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked slowly around the training floor, his footsteps deliberate. "Maybe," he said finally, heading toward the door. "We'll see." As Travis's motorcycle roared away, Ethan reflected on the encounter. Something had shifted in their dynamic, though it was too early to tell exactly what or how significant it might be. Change, he knew from experience, often came in small moments, quiet conversations, and unexpected opportunities. The rest of the week saw a flurry of activity as plans for the community gathering took shape. Lisa and her fellow students threw themselves into preparing demonstrations, their excitement infectious. Word spread through the neighborhood, and soon other businesses were asking to participate. Even Mr. Chun from the newsstand got involved, offering to create special posters announcing the event. "My son Marcus hasn't stopped practicing his forms at home," he told Ethan. "You've given him something to believe in, something to work toward." As Ethan walked home that evening, Scout guiding him through the familiar streets, he sensed the subtle changes in the neighborhood's atmosphere. Where there had been tension, there was now a growing sense of possibility. The training center had become more than just a place to learn martial arts. It was becoming a catalyst for something larger, something that even Travis Miller couldn't ignore. Back in his apartment, Ethan sat at his desk, fingers running over the Braille calendar as he marked the date for the community gathering. Scout lay at his feet, a constant reminder that strength often came in unexpected forms and that the greatest victories were rarely won through force alone. The challenge ahead was clear, not just to organize a successful event, but to continue building bridges in a community that had grown too accustomed to walls. As he prepared for bed, Ethan smiled, thinking of Lisa's growing confidence, Travis's subtle shift in attitude, and the countless small changes that were beginning to ripple through the neighborhood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the most powerful moves were the ones that brought people together rather than pushed them apart. As the community gathering at Martinez's restaurant drew closer, an unexpected rhythm began to develop at the training center. Each morning, before the first rays of sunlight touched the Portland skyline, Ethan and Scout arrived to prepare for the day ahead. But lately, they weren't alone. Travis had begun showing up at dawn, quietly watching the morning preparations from the doorway. At first, he would leave before the early classes started, the growl of his motorcycle fading into the distance. But gradually, he started staying longer, observing the training sessions with an intensity that spoke of something deeper than mere curiosity. One particularly crisp morning, as Ethan moved through his personal training routine, Travis finally broke his silence. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of vulnerability. "How do you keep going when everything's stacked against you?" Ethan paused, turning toward Travis's voice. "Come here," he said, gesturing to the center of the training mat. "Let me show you something." What followed was not a lesson in techniques or forms, but rather a demonstration of awareness. Ethan guided Travis through a series of exercises designed to heighten sensory perception, listening to the subtle shifts in air currents, feeling the vibrations through the floor, understanding the space around them in a completely new way. "When I lost my sight," Ethan explained, "I thought I'd lost everything that made me who I was. But what I actually lost was just one way of seeing the world. There are always other paths, other ways to understand and connect." Travis remained unusually quiet during the impromptu lesson, his typically aggressive demeanor softening into something more contemplative. "My old man used to say something similar," he finally offered. "Before he got sick and everything fell apart." The revelation hung in the air between them, a small piece of trust tentatively extended. Ethan recognized it for what it was, not just a personal disclosure, but a potential turning point. Meanwhile, the preparations for the community gathering continued to gain momentum. Lisa Martinez had organized a group of students to perform a synchronized demonstration, incorporating elements of traditional Taekwondo with contemporary movement. The local media had picked up on the story, framing it as a celebration of neighborhood unity and cultural exchange. Olivia, stopping by during her patrol, brought news that surprised everyone. "Some of Travis's crew members have been asking about beginner classes," she reported. "They're trying to be subtle about it, but word's getting around that something's changing." The shift wasn't limited to Travis and his crew. Other changes were rippling through the neighborhood. Mr. Chun reported that his newsstand had become a hub of conversation about the upcoming gathering, with people from different parts of the community stopping to chat and share ideas. Sarah from the coffee shop had begun offering special discounts to students from the training center, creating a warm space where parents could wait during classes and neighbors could connect. The simple act of sharing coffee and conversation was slowly breaking down barriers that had existed for years. One afternoon, as Ethan worked with a group of advanced students on a particularly challenging sequence, he heard Travis enter the dojang. But this time, he wasn't alone. The sound of smaller footsteps accompanied him. "This is my little sister, Angela," Travis said, his voice carrying an unexpected gentleness. "She's 10 and she wants to learn." The introduction marked a profound shift in their dynamic. Angela proved to be a natural student, her enthusiasm infectious. More significantly, her presence seemed to give Travis a new purpose. He began attending evening classes regularly, his natural athletic ability quickly becoming apparent as he shed his defensive armor. As the day of the gathering approached, the Martinez restaurant buzzed with activity. Traditional decorations were hung, training mats were arranged in the parking lot, and the aroma of special dishes filled the air. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The morning of the event, Ethan arrived early with Scout to find Travis and his crew already there, helping to set up chairs and equipment. The sound of their motorcycles, once a source of tension, had become just another part of the neighborhood's symphony. "Never thought I'd be doing something like this," Travis admitted as they worked. "Setting up for a community party instead of." He trailed off, leaving the unsaid history hanging between them. "Life has a way of surprising us," Ethan replied, a smile touching his lips. "The trick is being open to those surprises." Scout moved between them, his presence a reminder of how unexpected partnerships could form. The dog had become a bridge not just for Ethan, but for many in the community, his calm demeanor and watchful nature earning trust from all sides. As the morning progressed, more volunteers arrived. Lisa and her fellow students, dressed in their formal dobok, practiced their demonstration one last time. The Martinez family busied themselves in the kitchen, preparing food that would bring people together around shared tables. Olivia arrived in civilian clothes, but her presence still carried the weight of her position. She watched with satisfaction as former adversaries worked side by side, the boundaries that had once divided the neighborhood slowly dissolving. The transformation wasn't complete, change never is, but something fundamental had shifted. The training center had become more than just a place to learn martial arts. It had become a catalyst for community healing, a space where different paths could converge and new understandings could take root. As Ethan stood in the midst of the preparation, listening to the harmonious chaos around him, he realized that this was what true victory looked like. Not the defeat of an opponent, but the creation of something new and stronger through understanding and respect. The gathering was about to begin, and with it, another chapter in the neighborhood's ongoing story. But now, that story was being written by many hands, each contributing their own unique strength to the whole. The community gathering at Martinez's restaurant started as a celebration of unity, but nature had other plans. Dark clouds rolled in from the Pacific, bringing with them an unseasonable chill that sent people hurrying inside the restaurant's warm interior. "Looks like we'll need to modify our plans," Ethan observed, feeling the shift in air pressure that preceded the storm. Scout pressed closer to his side, always more alert during weather changes. The training mats they'd set up in the parking lot were quickly brought inside, transforming the restaurant's main dining area into an impromptu dojang. What could have been a disaster instead became something magical. The closer quarters created an intimacy that might have been lost in the outdoor space. The aroma of Mrs. Martinez's cooking mingled with the energy of the gathering crowd, creating an atmosphere that was both exciting and comforting. Lisa and her demonstration team adapted their performance to the smaller space, their movements becoming more precise and focused. The constraints actually enhanced their showcase, highlighting the control and discipline that were at the heart of their training. Travis, who had been unusually quiet all morning, stood near the back with his sister Angela. His crew members were scattered throughout the crowd, their leather jackets standing out among the mix of traditional dobaks and casual wear. But instead of creating tension, their presence added to the event's inclusive spirit. "Your students have come a long way," Travis commented to Ethan during a brief lull in the activities. "Especially Lisa. Hard to believe she's the same kid who could barely look anyone in the eye a few weeks ago." Ethan nodded, noting the genuine appreciation in Travis's voice. Sometimes all people need is a chance to show who they really are. He paused, then added, "Speaking of which, Angela's demonstration is up next. She's been practicing hard for this." The young girl's performance was a revelation. Despite having only trained for a few weeks, Angela moved with a natural grace that captured everyone's attention. Her brother watched with undisguised pride, his usual tough exterior softening as she executed each move with careful precision. Outside, the storm intensified, rain drumming against the windows and roof. But inside Martinez's restaurant, something remarkable was unfolding. People who had barely acknowledged each other on the street were now sharing tables, swapping stories, and finding common ground. Mr. Chun from the newsstand engaged in animated conversation with Sarah from the coffee shop about possibly coordinating their business hours to better serve the community. Olivia, still in civilian clothes, found herself deep in discussion with several of Travis's crew members about their interests in starting training. The event was everything Ethan had hoped for and more. But as the afternoon wore on, he sensed a subtle tension building beneath the surface. His acute hearing picked up fragments of worried conversations about rising rents and business pressures. The neighborhood was changing, and not everyone was sure they could weather those changes. During a break in the demonstrations, Mr. Martinez pulled Ethan aside. "We've received an offer to sell the restaurant," he confided, his voice heavy with concern. "A development company wants to build luxury apartments. They're offering good money, but this place, it's our life's work." Before Ethan could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A man in an expensive suit had entered, accompanied by two others carrying briefcases. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. "James Wheeler," Olivia murmured to Ethan. "He represents Vista Development. They've been buying up properties all over the neighborhood." Wheeler moved through the crowd with practiced confidence, stopping to speak with various business owners. His smile never reached his eyes, and his words, though polite, carried an underlying pressure that set Scout on edge. Travis watched the proceedings with growing agitation, his hands clenching into fists. But before he could act, Angela tugged at his sleeve, pulling him back to the present moment. The simple gesture seemed to center him, reminding him of how much had changed. Ethan moved through the crowd with purpose, Scout guiding him smoothly around clusters of people. He could feel the community's anxiety, the fear that everything they'd built could be swept away by forces beyond their control. Wheeler eventually made his way to Ethan, his expensive cologne announcing his presence before he spoke. "Mr. Cole, I presume? I've heard interesting things about your facility. Have you considered what it might take to upgrade to a more suitable location?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. The storm outside seemed to intensify, as if nature itself was responding to the tension in the room. Ethan's response was measured but firm. "This neighborhood isn't just a collection of properties, Mr. Wheeler. It's a community. One that's growing stronger every day." Wheeler's laugh was soft but dismissive. "Communities change, Mr. Cole. It's the natural order of things. The question is whether you'll change with them or be left behind." As Wheeler and his associates departed, leaving behind a wake of uncertainty, Ethan felt the weight of the community's eyes on him. They had come together to celebrate unity, but now faced a challenge that would test that unity in ways they hadn't expected. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, something was crystallizing. The gathered residents looked at each other with new understanding. The differences that had once divided them seemed insignificant compared to the threat of losing their neighborhood soul. Travis moved to stand beside Ethan, his presence unexpectedly reassuring. "So," he said quietly, "what's the plan?" The question wasn't just for Ethan. It was for everyone who called this neighborhood home. As the gathering continued, conversations shifted from celebration to collaboration, from sharing memories to planning for the future. The storm outside would eventually pass, but the energy it had helped create, the determination to protect what mattered, would continue to grow. The real test was just beginning, and it would require everything they had learned about strength, unity, and the power of standing together. The week following the community gathering brought changes as swift and powerful as the storm that had marked its beginning. The threat from Vista Development had acted as a catalyst, transforming loose community bonds into something far more substantial. Early morning at the training center now looked very different. Travis and several of his crew members had become regular fixtures at dawn practice, their motorcycles parked in neat rows outside. More surprisingly, they had started bringing others, shop owners, residents, and even some of Wheeler's other potential targets in the neighborhood. "It's about more than just learning to punch and kick," Travis explained to a group of newcomers, his voice carrying an authority that came from genuine understanding. "It's about finding your center when everything around you is trying to knock you down." Ethan, listening from across the room as he guided another student through a form, felt a surge of pride at how far Travis had come. The young man's natural leadership abilities, once used to intimidate, were now being channeled into something constructive. The training center had become a hub of community organization. Between classes, people gathered to share information and develop strategies. Mr. Chun started maintaining a detailed map of properties Vista Development had approached, while Sarah from the coffee shop established a communication network among local business owners. "They're trying to divide us," Olivia observed during one of these impromptu meetings. "Offering different deals to different people, hoping to create competition and distrust." She had been carefully documenting patterns in Vista's approach, her police training proving valuable in unexpected ways. Lisa Martinez, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "But we're stronger together, right? That's what you've been teaching us, Master Cole. When we move as one, we can't be broken." Her words sparked something in the group. The Martinez restaurant had become a symbol of resistance, not through confrontation, but through the simple act of bringing people together. Every evening, the tables were full of neighbors sharing meals and strategies, building the kind of community bonds that no developer could easily break. One morning, as Ethan worked with Angela on a particularly challenging sequence, he heard Travis enter the dojang with unusual urgency. "Wheeler's people are making their final push," he reported. "They're telling everyone they have to decide by the end of the week. Accept their offers or risk losing everything." The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Instead of creating panic, however, it generated a remarkable response. The community that had come together in the training center began to move with the same discipline and unity they had learned on the mats. Mr. Martinez called an emergency meeting at his restaurant. The usually jovial owner spoke with quiet determination about his family's history in the neighborhood, about the memories woven into every corner of his establishment. As he finished, others began sharing their own stories, generations of history, dreams built brick by brick, the invisible threads that bound them all together. That evening, as Ethan and Scout walked home, They were accompanied by an unusual escort, Travis and several of his crew members. "Just making sure everyone stays safe," Travis explained, though they both knew it was about more than that. It was about showing that the community looked after its own. The next few days saw an extraordinary mobilization. Sarah's communication network proved invaluable as business owners coordinated their responses to Vista's pressure. Mr. Chen's mapping revealed patterns that helped them understand Wheeler's strategy. Even Scout seemed to sense the importance of their mission, staying extra vigilant during his rounds with Ethan. Lisa and her fellow students organized a demonstration in front of City Hall, showcasing not just their martial arts skills but the strength of their community bonds. The local media, attracted by the unusual sight of teenagers, business owners, and former troublemakers working together, began telling their story. Wheeler's response was predictable: increased pressure, veiled threats about property values, and missed opportunities. But he hadn't counted on the resistance taking such an organized, unified form. Each attempt to divide the community only seemed to bring people closer together. The training center remained at the heart of it all, not just as a place of physical training but as a symbol of what they were fighting for. Every class now ended with discussions about community, about finding strength in unity, about standing firm in the face of pressure. Angela, watching her brother help coordinate community patrols with Olivia, summed it up perfectly. "It's like you always say, Master Cole, true power isn't about dominating others, it's about lifting each other up." As the deadline Wheeler had set approached, the neighborhood prepared for whatever might come next. The training center buzzed with energy as people came and went, sharing updates and offering support. Scout moved through the crowd with careful attention, his presence a reminder of how unexpected partnerships could become the strongest bonds. The community they had built wasn't just resisting change, it was transforming it into something new and powerful. Each person who stepped onto the training mats carried with them not just their own hopes but the strength of an entire neighborhood. The real battle was just beginning, but they would face it together, moving with the unity and purpose they had learned in the dojang. Wheeler and Vista Development were about to discover that some things couldn't be bought or broken, they could only be made stronger by trying. The deadline set by Vista Development arrived with the first rays of dawn breaking over Portland's skyline. Instead of the quiet morning routine at the training center, Ethan arrived to find the space already buzzing with activity. Scout's steady presence helped him navigate through the gathered crowd, their voices a mix of determination and nervous energy. Travis was the first to break the morning's tension. "Wheeler's people are making their rounds," he reported, his voice carrying across the room. "They're expecting to collect signed contracts, but they're in for a surprise." The surprise had been carefully orchestrated over the past week. Every business owner, every property holder who had received Vista's offers, had prepared their responses. But more importantly, they had prepared something else, a counterproposal that would change the entire dynamic. Mr. Martinez stood at the center of the group, unfolding the documents they had worked on together. "My daughter found something interesting in the city's historical records," he announced, pride evident in his voice. "This neighborhood qualifies for historical district designation. The paperwork has already been filed." The revelation sent a ripple through the gathering. Historical district status would significantly complicate Vista's plans for luxury development. It wasn't just a defensive move, it was a statement about the value they placed on their community's heritage. Ethan moved through his morning class as usual, but there was nothing usual about this day. His students moved with extra focus, each form and technique carrying the weight of their collective purpose. Even the youngest practitioners seemed to understand the significance of the moment. By mid-morning, Wheeler himself arrived at the training center, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. Scout's low growl was the only indication of tension as the developer approached. "This is quite the gathering," Wheeler observed, his voice carrying forced pleasantness. "I hope you all understand what's at stake here. Progress can't be stopped, Mr. Cole. It can only be guided." Ethan turned to face Wheeler's voice, his stance relaxed but purposeful. "You're right about one thing," he replied. "Progress can't be stopped. But real progress lifts everyone up, not just a select few." Travis stepped forward, Angela at his side. The young man who had once terrorized the neighborhood now spoke with the authority of someone who had found his true strength. "We've got our own plans for progress," he stated. "And we're not asking for permission." The community's counterproposal was presented with quiet confidence. They had worked with local architects and urban planners to develop a vision for neighborhood improvement that preserved its character while allowing for sustainable growth. The historical district designation was just one part of a larger strategy. Wheeler's response was immediate and predictable: threats of legal action, warnings about lost opportunities, attempts to drive wedges between different community members. But the unity they had built proved stronger than his tactics. Olivia, who had taken the day off to be present, provided a calm voice of legal expertise. "Everything we're proposing is within our rights," she explained. "And we have the support of several city council members who understand the value of preserving community character." As the day progressed, news spread through the neighborhood. Sarah's coffee shop became a hub of celebration as positive responses began flowing in from city officials. Mr. Chen's newsstand displayed headlines about community resistance to corporate development, featuring photos of the training center students performing demonstrations. Lisa Martinez, working alongside her parents at the restaurant, served meals to a constant stream of supporters and well-wishers. The place had never been busier, filled with people sharing stories and strengthening bonds that Wheeler had tried to break. Evening found Ethan standing in the center of his dojang, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling into a new rhythm. Scout lay at his feet, both of them tired but content. The day's events had tested their unity in ways that went beyond physical training, and they had emerged stronger. Travis approached quietly, his footsteps now familiar to Ethan's trained ear. "Wheeler's backing down," he reported. "His lawyers say the historical district designation changes everything. They want to negotiate now." "And what do we want?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. "We want what we've always wanted," Travis replied. "A chance to build something real, something that lasts. Not just for us, but for kids like Angela, for families like the Martinezes, for everyone who calls this place home." The victory wasn't final. There would be more challenges ahead. But they had learned something invaluable. True strength wasn't in resisting change, but in shaping it together. The lessons of the dojang had spread far beyond its walls, teaching an entire community how to stand firm, move with purpose, and rise stronger with each challenge. As night fell over Portland, the neighborhood settled into a peace that felt different from before. It wasn't the quiet of surrender, but the calm confidence of people who had discovered their collective power. The storm had passed, leaving behind a community that was more than ready for whatever came next. 6 months after the confrontation with Vista Development, the neighborhood had transformed in ways no developer could have planned. The training center, once just a symbol of personal growth, had become the beating heart of a community renaissance. On a bright spring morning, Ethan stood at the center of his expanded dojang, listening to the sounds of construction outside. The historical district designation had attracted grants for preservation and improvement, allowing businesses to upgrade while maintaining their character. The rhythmic sounds of work crews mixed with the everyday bustle of neighborhood life created a symphony of progress. "Master Cole." Angela's excited voice cut through his thoughts. "Did you hear? My brother's proposal got approved by the community council." Travis's transformation had been perhaps the most remarkable of all. The former troublemaker had channeled his leadership abilities into community development, working with local business owners to create opportunities for young people in the neighborhood. His latest project, a youth mentorship program combining martial arts training with business skills, had received unanimous support. "Your brother has found his true path," Ethan replied, smiling as Scout wagged his tail at Angela's familiar presence. "Sometimes the strongest people are those who learn to lift others up." The Martinez restaurant had become a showcase for this new community spirit. Mr. Martinez had used the preservation funds to restore the building's historic facade while modernizing the kitchen. More importantly, he had started a program teaching culinary skills to local youth, with Lisa helping to coordinate classes between her training sessions. "The food tastes even better now," Sarah from the coffee shop often said, "because it's seasoned with hope." Mr. Chen's newsstand had evolved into a community information center, displaying not just headlines but updates on local initiatives and success stories. His son Marcus, now an advanced student at the training center, had started a neighborhood newsletter celebrating their shared achievements. Olivia's role had evolved as well. Her experience with the Vista Development confrontation had inspired her to pursue additional training in community policing. She now led workshops on neighborhood safety that emphasized cooperation and mutual support rather than confrontation. The training center itself had grown, not just in size but in purpose. While martial arts remained its foundation, the space hosted community meetings, youth programs, and special events that brought people together. The principles of discipline, respect, and mutual support that Ethan taught on the mats had become guiding values for the entire neighborhood. One evening, as the sun set over Portland, the community gathered for a special celebration. The occasion was the first anniversary of the training center's opening, but it represented much more than that. Tables from the Martinez restaurant spilled out onto the street, Sarah's coffee flowed freely, and Mr. Chen distributed special commemorative editions of the neighborhood newsletter. Travis, standing beside Ethan as they listened to the happy chaos, spoke softly. "You know, when I first saw you setting up this place, I thought you were just another outsider trying to change things. I never imagined." "Change was always coming," Ethan replied, Scout alert but relaxed at his side. "The question was whether we'd let it divide us or bring us together." Angela, who had just finished demonstrating advanced forms for the gathered crowd, joined them. "Master Cole," she said, her voice carrying the confidence she developed over months of training, "remember when you told us that true strength comes from within? I think I finally understand what you meant." The evening air filled with music, laughter, and conversations in multiple languages. Children practiced martial arts moves on impromptu mats, while their parents shared stories and plans for the future. The neighborhood hadn't just survived change, it had embraced it on its own terms. Lisa Martinez, now preparing to compete in her first regional tournament, summed it up perfectly in her speech to the gathering. "We learned that the strongest foundations aren't built with concrete and steel, but with trust, respect, and the willingness to stand together." As the celebration continued into the night, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. His own path had seemed to end with the accident that took his sight, but instead, it had led him to something far more meaningful. With Scout's guidance and the support of an entire community, he had helped create something that would outlast any individual achievement. The neighborhood continued to face challenges, but they now approached them with the unity and purpose they had learned together. New businesses opened, families moved in, and changes came, but the core values they had fought to preserve remained strong. In the end, it wasn't just about preserving buildings or stopping developers. It was about proving that true progress couldn't be measured in property values alone. It lived in the connections between people, in the strength they found together, and in their commitment to lifting each other up. As the stars appeared over Portland, the community that had come together in a small Taekwondo training center continued their celebration, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together, moving forward with the grace, strength, and unity they had learned on the mats. Dear viewers, we hope that Ethan and the community's journey has touched your hearts. To continue experiencing such emotionally engaging stories, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We bring unique stories exploring life's complexities every day. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments.